Good evening, everyone. Today we have gathered for our second policy discussion. The topic for this policy discussion that we have today is government initiatives to uplift the enrollment and quality of education across government schools in India. I welcome everyone on behalf of Sestari School. We have a guest speaker session followed by the discussions. We also have a notable economist who we have here is Ms. Kohima Goyal, ma'am. I welcome you, ma'am, today to our session. Kohima, ma'am, I would like to say a few words about you. Kohima, ma'am, has worked with rural communities in remote areas of India on improving participation of communities in schools. She has also worked on enhancing the reach of government policies like right to education and other social policies that usually fail to reach the lowest strata of society. She was working with the Ministry of Education in India before starting her master's in public policy at LKY, University of Singapore. So I welcome you, ma'am, and we're really glad to have you here today.
Hi, thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Very good evening. I'm glad to be here. And thank you for having me. I look forward to a good session with you all.
Ma'am, before we ask you some questions, would you like to say something about the topic that we have today that we'll be discussing?
Sure. I think so. I like the way the topic has been scoped down because education in India is, I think, before I get to the topic, actually, I know that the majority of the students who are here are college going students, but if you can share a bit about, I mean, a bit about the students so that I'm able to share my experience in that context better. I think that would also be helpful. I just know that a majority of you are college students, but
sure, ma'am. So,
yeah.
ma'am, basically, most of the people that have joined today are policy research enthusiasts. They are all looking forward and exploring the field of public policy. They all have been working towards and learning how to analyze and how to have a perspective about the same. So yes.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that helps me. Thank you so much, which is interesting because frankly speaking, before we get started with the questions, when I was in college, I had no idea what policy is and what policy meant at that point of time. In India, frankly speaking, policy is a growing domain. It's still in its growing phase where governments and all the other stakeholders are also trying to understand how to. So we usually call policy as public policy, right? But frankly speaking, in India, policy is not. It's not public policy yet. It is still in the growing phase. And I'll share more details about that as we go forward. But which is good to know that at this stage in your college, you guys are keen to understand what policy and what public policy is, because I, frankly speaking, had no clue when I was in college what policy is. This is something that I ventured into eventually after I worked for a few years in different places around India, and that's when I realized that policy is something that is interesting to me and I would want to work in this space. So this is really interesting that you already have an understanding, or at least you're trying to understand what policy is in the context of India and in the context of outside India also. So which is nice. Good to know that.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Moving on, so I would like to call Ishani to speak about the topic and briefly introduce it.
Thank you, Abhiniti. Good evening, everyone. First of all, welcome, ma'am. We are glad to have you here for our first policy Manthan. And today our topic is focused around two major educational challenges across India. Number one is to increase the enrollment of children across government schools. And the second is to improve the quality of education imparted through these government schools. Under the first challenge, we would be majorly discussing schemes, government initiatives, which focuses on promoting that idea is promoting the idea that Indian school is indeed a space for all. It is a space for the female child, the male child obviously, and also for the specially able children, So the government has certain programs like the Beti Bachao Beti Padhao Yojana, the Swachh Vidyalaya Abhiyan, Rani Lakshmi by Atmanirbhar Parikshan, which encourages the enrollment of the female child. It has a Saksham scholarship which encourages the specially able children to also join government schools. Under the second bit, it also has certain programs that focuses on the northeastern states and northeastern community to join government schools as well. Moving forward to the second challenge we will be focusing on to improve the quality of education, the government has certain schemes um, like recently the RTE Act or the Right to Education Act was amended, and the period for in-service training for untrained elementary teachers was extended by 1 year. So it basically mandatorized the fact that the teacher should have a necessary B.Ed degree or some sort of degree recognized by a specific authority. And also, the government is recently promoting tech based education, like through the Diksha platform, which is a one nation, one digital platform. And it basically provides quality e content for children across schools in India. And lastly, we have schemes like the midday meal schemes, which actually encourages the people from the low strata of the economy to send their children to school so that they can at least have one meal per day. Um, So, yeah, that's it. Through our discussion, we would like to share our insights, our views on how are these schemes, what is the current status of the schemes today, what we feel are the major drawbacks, major shortcomings of the schemes, what we feel should be the solutions to these schemes as students. So, yes, I'm really excited for the session today. Looking forward for it. All the very best to everyone. And yeah, thank you so much. That's it from my end.
Thank you so much, Ashani. Now we'll be starting off with the discussion. So before we move on to the discussion wherein our members talk about their perspectives, we would like to talk about the same topic with Kohima ma'am. So I would like to raise the first question. Ma'am, my first question is that what according to you are some government initiatives that have impacted the school education very hugely?
Sure. I think Ishani did mention a lot of initiatives, and I think my answers might also overlap with what she mentioned in a lot of ways, because I personally feel midday meal is, as she also mentioned, is like a major scheme that Government of India initiated. And I think all of us see this as a scheme largely, but I think it goes beyond than being a scheme, because sitting here, it's easy for us to say that it's just a scheme that provides one times meal for students. But I think the larger purpose of the scheme is way beyond that. Because today's theme is how to increase enrollment in government schools, I think the agenda was to increase enrollment through this scheme, because a lot of students did not end up coming to school because their parents could not afford even a day's meal. And I think this has been proven by research that a child who's hungry cannot focus in studies, right? So I think the larger agenda of introducing a scheme like midday meal was definitely to increase the enrollment. And if you go by research and if you go by numbers, if you dig deep in how the scheme has done in the recent years, it has been able to improve enrollment at a very large scale across the states in India. So I feel that it is a very good initiative, and I think a lot of other countries also now have learned this from India, and I think they're trying to do something similar on the similar lines in their own capacities to increase enrollment, at least for the rural communities, if not in the cities, but in villages and at district level. So this is a major scheme, I think. And apart from that, I think Ishani did mention Diksha. I was also working at on this scheme for some time while I was in the ministry. And I think this has also gone a long way, because I think one of the challenges that education faced during COVID was access, right? And providing a digital means to access these resources, both for students and teachers. I think Diksha has been able to do that to some extent. It has worked as a platform where both students and teachers can access online content. And I think this is needed in today's context. I think it's good to know that, all of us have devices in our hands, but why not use those devices for the benefit of the learning? So I think government is trying to do a lot in terms of technology and ensuring that access is at least there. And then the next step is definitely learning outcomes. I think there's still a lot to be done on the front of learning outcomes. But yes, I think Diksha and midday meal are two schemes that I think have done really something to push the enrollment, both digitally and in person. Yeah.
Thanks for a great answer, ma'am. I'm Krish Yadav. I didn't introduce myself before, but I noticed I want to ask a question about the role of training teachers at a foundation level to improve the teaching process in our country and in schools, because I think all the policies we talked about till now, especially, were focusing on the students, right? I was wondering what could be done on the other side of things.
So sorry if I get this correctly, you're saying around what else could the government do around teacher training, right? As to what they're currently doing.
Yeah.
Sure. So this is something that's very close to my heart. I think this is something that I personally feel government needs to do a lot more than what they're currently doing. So if you see, I've also been on the other side. I've been an engineer initially. I graduated in my engineering. My bachelor's was engineering. If you see the trajectory of an engineer, just see a life cycle of an engineer. You start when you graduate, you call yourself as an engineer, right? Some of you might be doing that, or maybe doing some other professional courses in your college. But I'll take the example of an engineer. You graduate as an engineer, and then maybe you progress to become a programmer or a coder, and maybe an analyst at a later point of time. And then your career progression is something like, say, you become a team leader or you become a manager. So you have a career progression, and that's how you envision yourself when you enroll yourself in a course like engineering, right? But now apply the same thing to the role of a teacher. A teacher remains a teacher all through their life. They don't have a career progression, which is very sad all through the world. It is not just in India. This is a problem that I see is, and I don't understand why policymakers or governments don't see this as a problem. So one of the things when you ask that what should governments be additionally doing when you say teacher training, I think they need to see teachers as an individual also, apart from seeing teachers as someone who are trying to teach children and try to improve the learning outcomes of the country. It is very important to focus on teachers as individuals and to look at these teacher trainings as an option, as an opportunity for these teachers to personally and professionally grow in their careers. I think currently we only look at teachers as a role models for students and as someone who would go out in the class and teach and come out. That's it. That's the end of it. I think we need to go beyond that. There's a lot that is happening in teacher training, but I think currently teacher training doesn't focus on professional development or career growth of these teachers. So this is something that I personally feel is very important at this point of time, when we say that a lot of our education policies are failing because the capacity is lacking. And where will this capacity come if you're not focusing on teachers? If you're only looking at them as like as a system who's trying to help students, but not beyond their own personal capacities. So I think that is a module that must be introduced in teacher training.
Oh, ma'am, I totally agree on this, because training teachers is like the need of an hour, because with education changing its form of method of teaching and learning, so we also need to understand that we need to upgrade the skills, because if the skills are not being upgraded, it will be very difficult for the teachers to actually deliver what exactly the education system wants. So ma'am, you just mentioned that this is one of the cons and one of the reasons as to why the initiatives and the policies are failing. So apart from this, what is the biggest issue according to you which the government should focus on while making initiatives for school education? I mean, this is one of the this is one of the major issues that we should work on and we should try to tackle. So
sorry, can you just repeat that question?
Yeah, so ma'am, what is one of what are the biggest issues that the government should focus and work upon while tackling the while creating initiatives for school education?
Some of the issues that the government should focus on, definitely teacher training is one. I think capacity building, as I mentioned in my previous sharing also, that we need to look at the overall capacity building of the system, not through just teachers. There are a lot of other stakeholders that are also equally important in this system, right? But we eventually end up focusing only on teachers and only on students. So I think the capacity building of this entire ecosystem needs to take place at a very large level. Other thing I think is, while Ishani and I were discussing about these schemes that the government is doing, if you go back and try to understand in detail how these schemes have done over the years, you will realize that eventually government has only been able to focus their efforts on, for example, you're talking about enrollment in today's, our theme is enrollment, how to increase enrollment. I think largely, even after so many years, our focus has remained only until enrollment. We haven't been able to look beyond that. If the entire agenda of sending a child to school is enhancing their learning, why are we not talking about learning outcomes? Why are we not talking about schemes or methods or ways of tackling or improving these learning outcomes? Why do our schemes always remain limited at improving enrollment? I know that is the first step. I completely agree that we cannot talk about learning outcomes until we are able to improve enrollment in schools. And there's no point of learning outcomes if a child is not going to school, right? I agree to that fact. But we have to start talking about that if we want to focus on that. If our narrative is not around learning outcomes, we will never be able to build our schemes around that and start focusing on learning outcomes. All the schemes that currently government is doing in all the programs, be it Diksha, be it midday meal, or a lot of other things that the government is trying to do, providing free bicycles, providing a lot of other benefits to parents and students so that they get enrolled in school, or to stop the dropout from happening. I think they largely remain focused at just ensuring that the child is attending school regularly. I think we really need to start to look beyond that now. That narrative has to come at least. That narrative I feel is missing in all the government policies. And I think this was also missing in the national education policy, which recently came out. It talks about a lot of other things, but the focus on learning outcomes and how can you improve and measure these learning outcomes is still not there. So, yeah.
Ma'am, so basically the attitude needs to, there should be a change in the attitude before we actually implement something or something that can actually make a change, is what you're trying to say.
Unless the government, so it's like that. The thing goes like that. The narrative is usually run by the government, at least in countries like India. And even if you go at a state level or at a district level, it's the government who builds the narrative around these things, like around health, around education. So until the government starts publicizing and starts promoting about learning outcomes and why just not sending a child to school is enough, it needs to start promoting things like that yes, okay, you need to send your child to school, but what beyond that? You also need to ensure that the child is learning inside the classroom. I think that kind of narrative and that kind of publicity through TV, through radio, through reaching out to parents in personal capacity it needs to start building up now. Otherwise, we will just stay at enrollment and we will never be able to go beyond that.
Definitely.
Ma'am, I had a question. Ma'am, how do you see public policy evolving in the near future? As to with respect to India, how do you see it will progress in the next 5 years, maybe?
Sure. This is a very broad question, but yeah, specifically in the context of school education and specifically in the context of India, if I put these three things together, India, public policy, school education, I think two things that broadly come to my mind is, one is it has started, I see that it is starting to become evidence-based now. If you go back and you look at previous policies, I don't know if you've gotten a chance to read. If you haven't, please go through the 1986, the initial national policy that came around education. This was the best policy that came, by the way, frankly speaking. It's not, the current policies are even not even close to what came out in those years. But I think what public policy might start looking at after, say, 5 years or 6 years is, it's going to be a lot of evidence-based thinking. There is no conversation around policy that can happen even today without numbers. If you don't have data to support your argument, if we say that the number of enrollments in school education in India is increasing, but you don't support it by numbers, no one is going to believe you that the enrollment is increasing. If you are a representative of, say, a state, and you go up to the ministry and say that my state has done far better than some other state in enrollment, you will have to present some numbers, right? So I think it is becoming a lot of evidence-based policy making, and hence why we have a lot of these monitoring systems in place. UDICE is something that the government has built recently, the Unified District Information System, wherein we track all the states and how these schools within these states are doing. So I think it's a lot around numbers. Nothing around policy can happen these days without supporting it and backing it with evidence. And because evidence is important, this is an era when we say that policy making will soon be moving towards evidence-based policy making. That's how it's usually termed as nowadays. And the other thing that I see is participatory. So I remember going through a reading which said that policy making, I think in India currently also at this point of time, as I said very initially at the beginning of the call, that it's evolving. And the reason I say that it's evolving because it's still the government who's doing everything. Government comes up with the policy. They decide what the policy is going to be. They decide how the policy is going to be implemented. And they decide who's going to evaluate it and what are they going to do after the policy is getting implemented. I think, but now over some years, maybe it is going to be participatory. It is not just government who's going to decide what the policy is going to be. They're trying to have these conversations and discussions with a lot of NGOs, with young people like you and me who have an understanding of what policy is, why is this important. They're trying to have these discussions with a lot of other stakeholders, and they're trying to engage a lot of stakeholders in these broad conversations around policy, which is very interesting. I think this is a very good step which the government has taken, and this should be continued over the years. That you listen the views of all the other people who are in the system and who are contributing maybe directly or indirectly to this concept of policy making. And then government decides, this is the policy that maybe suits best to everyone. And I think this is something that they tried doing with NEP also. When NEP was taking shape, a lot of stakeholder consultations were carried out with a lot of organizations who are working in their own respective spaces. Because, for example, Ishani is an expert on, say, child development, and Abhiniti is an expert on, say, learning outcomes. So if both of you have your own strengths, why not go and share those with the government, and government builds and learns from you and builds the policy eventually. So I think this is how the policy space is taking shape now in India.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask a follow-up question pertaining to this, that you mentioned about evidence policy making. So at this point, should the government focus on the quantity, or it should focus more on the quality? Because you can see that, like, we as a whole, we can see that these education in the government schools are not actually that up to the mark, as a result of which probably the education of the students are being hampered in some way. So are they focusing so much on quantity that they are actually losing out the quality? So yeah,
this is an interesting question. Actually, I don't think I will be able to be accurate on the answer, but I can share my own perspective on this question and how I see things to be working around in India. So when you talk about governments versus all the other people who are working in education, for example, consider an NGO who is working in education in Delhi. How do you see that NGO working in education, working to improve enrollment and working to improve learning outcomes in Delhi versus the Delhi government itself who's trying to do the same thing, right? So we usually get asked a lot about what is the role of an NGO then? If the government is already trying to do everything that it can do to improve learning outcomes. But here comes the question of quality versus quantity. An NGO can only reach out to a limited number of people eventually. The scale at which a government can work, no one can work, which is a fact. And we must all accept this fact that uh, in terms of quantity, it is just the government who has that reach and that capacity to cover everyone. So I think because the government is trying to reach a lot of people at the same time, it eventually compromises on quality. That's the problem that I foresee. And that's the problem that is currently also happening in India because we are a populous country and a lot many students need to be catered at the same time. And in that hope that we should be able to reach out to each and every child, the quality gets affected, which is the problem. I think, but over a period of time, there are a lot of things that that the government is trying to do in collaboration with a lot of NGOs and smaller organizations. They are trying to improve on the quality bit. But I think in terms of quantity, it is definitely the government only who can do that. No NGO, no other organization can ever be able to work at the scale at which a government can work.
Hello, ma'am. I had a question for you. So, ma'am, India had many initiatives, like government have started many initiatives like SWAYAM and everything. So, don't you think tech policy has a lot of work to do in terms of that? Because it hasn't reached many sections of the society right now, or let's say many don't have the opportunity or the resources to access even facilities like SWAYAM. So don't you think our tax policy has a lot to do with that? Even though government has promised a lot about PPP, public-private partnership roles and everything for telecommunications also, there hasn't a lot of implementations happening right now. So don't you think tech policy has a lot of thing to do regarding that?
Yeah, thanks Akshara for the question. I completely agree to there's no two ways about that, that government is definitely trying to do a lot and there is still a lot, more than a lot that can be done in terms of tech policy. I think in India, I think geography, a lot of social constraints are there that just hampers the implementation of a lot of policies.
Yes.
So even though government did a lot of things during COVID, I think COVID was it was like a mirror to the government saying that, see, you're doing a lot of things, but then it's not happening. It's not happening on ground. You really need to push harder to make yourself make your reach to each and every child. So even though we say that Swayam is there, and as you said that there are still a lot of students who do not own a device, there might be still a lot of families who own a single device, and the father, the children, everyone have to use that same phone to study, to attend their office, to do everything, which is a huge challenge in India. But I think a lot of private, as you said, PPP model, a lot of private organizations are trying to come and help and support government in that sense. They're trying to supplement and complement the existing efforts of the government and trying to ensure that at least children have access to devices, if not laptops, at least some phones, or if not phones, government is also trying to do it through radio. They also did it through loudspeakers. There has been a lot of there have been some very nice and beautiful stories how government was able to reach in the remotest of the areas through loudspeakers, and they were able to conduct these classes through loudspeakers. So I think there has to be hope. You will have to always be hopeful that there is a lot to be done, but then there is a lot that is happening also. Only if we live with that hope that things are happening and they will keep on improving, I think I think that hope keeps you going.
Yes.
So
Certainly.
yeah, that's what I believe.
All right, ma'am. Thank you for that answer. Ma'am, one more question. You talked about training for teachers. So a lot of institutions have this concept of organization and methods, which we also go on through public administration also. So basically that focuses on improving the knowledge, what already the any institution for that matter, even if it's teachers or if it's for bureaucrats, it's for reviving their knowledge and to understand the basics in a much deep-rooted manner. So don't you think such facility would have a better development in our education systems in the near coming future?
Yeah, I think so. If I understood your question correctly, is this like do you envision this something like an upskilling program for teachers, or is it like professional development, which I also mentioned in my previous discussion? How do you?
It can be also upskilling thing, ma'am, but it can also be like policy discussions with the persons who are working in the deep bottom up level. So it can also be that, or it can be some programs or initiatives like upskill methods which you have been talking about.
Yeah, I think this is something that in a country like India, where unfortunately or fortunately, teachers also have to do a lot of administrative work. So there was this.
Yes.
When I was working as a CM fellow in Madhya Pradesh, I understood. So everyone, it's very easy to say that why are teachers given administrative work? A lot of students when I was at your age and I was in college, we also had this notion that why are they given administrative work? Why can't the administrative people who are responsible for doing that, for example, for conducting election duties, why are teachers forced to do election duties? And we always have the notion that this shouldn't be happening. They should not be forced to do work other than teaching because they are
They have
teachers.
been burdened up.
Yeah, but if you go on ground and if you work on ground, you will realize that the scale which Abhiniti mentioned and which I also shared a bit about, the scale at which our education setup in India is, it's no one else who can do that. It's just the teachers who have the reach in each and every village and each and every block of India. This is a realization that I had when I was working at a district level for 2 years, that no other government official or no other admin person can actually be as reachable as a teacher is. If you go to a remotest of the remotest village of India, you will realize that that village is connected to a teacher in some school, but they might not be connected to any other government official, and hence the responsibility of a lot of admin work which government eventually has to do comes down to a teacher. So that is a problem that is a problem that everyone knows, but no one has a solution to this. So that is a reason why a lot of professional development, or say upskilling, that teachers should be undergoing apart from their usual teaching, classroom teaching time, they miss on it. Even though government plans it, the government tries to invest a lot in this. They so recently, I think a lot was happening on teacher training. There was this program called I'm forgetting the name. I think someone of you might remember it. I'm forgetting the name. This was a huge Nishtha, I think. Yeah, it's a huge teacher training program that was launched with a lot of money invested in it, but it did as well as it was expected. It's because of all these reasons. Because eventually, even if you're a teacher and you're expected to go and attend that training, you are validly expected to do a lot of admin work also.
Yeah, definitely.
That balance somehow is missing. So I think, yeah, it's government is trying to do a lot, but I think there is again that balance still needs to be there.
Thank you so much for the answer, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question.
I needed to ask that the way we've been focusing on the needs of the students, which is midday meal program, it focuses on how meals can incentivize enrollment, and we focus on teacher trainings. is there a place for infrastructure, school buildings to improvise in a way that they incentivize education or enrollment in education? Do smart classrooms or technology involvement in education, does that work for Indian scenario?
Thank you for your question, Nirja. Yes, definitely. I think that's the first step, and I think we didn't talk about it because it's somehow uh, we usually say that this is an obvious thing that the government should be doing. It's just always there outrightly, and people assume, which is also a problem. Uh, we all assume that this is already there, and hence we go a step beyond and we start talking about teachers, we start talking about enrollment, but no one comes back and says that, but wait, is there a classroom that kids can sit and start, and kids can sit comfortably and learn? Do they have benches and chairs? Do they even have a blackboard that the teacher can teach on, which is a huge area that the government needs to focus on, and it is focusing. As Akshara mentioned in the previous question about PPP, there is a lot that is happening in terms of improving the existing infrastructure in schools through the PPP model, which is great, because government eventually, even though they have the scale and they have the money to reach to every school and work on the infrastructure, they somehow cannot. And a lot of CSR is trying to come in and help government in their existing efforts to improve the infrastructure. And I think this is something that also needs to be pushed through the narrative thing that I mentioned in the previous, in the first question, that I mean, the way you put it is really interesting, because which is true. We talk about teachers, we talk about learning outcomes, but we do not talk about whether there is a fan in the classroom or not. Are the students even comfortable physically and mentally and emotionally sitting in that classroom before we start talking about learning outcomes? So this is interesting, and this is an important aspect of the entire school education narrative that we are discussing today, and we usually discuss outside with a lot of other people. And government, somehow they have these policies in place that they try to monitor if the infrastructure is good or not. But I think they are unable to monitor it frequently. They don't realize it that they've given it there at once, but is it sustainable or not? Infrastructure eventually needs a replacement, right? I am staying in a hostel in Singapore, and this is they say that this hostel is like 50 years old or 60 years old, something, but they don't realize that the walls, the infrastructure of this room might need a replacement. This is a similar problem in our school education setup in India, that we have given it once, but do we frequently check it? Do we go on those visits and see that, is it still there? Is it still in a condition that children can use it or not? I think there are these hard questions that now government needs to start asking themselves. And more than asking themselves, they need to have like a strong reporting mechanism, a bottom-up reporting mechanism that gives them a broader idea that, this is the amount of infrastructure that is still lacking. And this is probably one of the reasons why learning outcomes are getting affected.
Yeah, so self-introspection for the government is what is needed, along with inspections of the existing infrastructure and policies in the education sector. I agree on this because the condition is not very good, and only like the schools which are already well built and well maintained are getting most of the funds. So the ones that actually need them are lacking behind, and this needs to be checked regularly to ensure that there is proper administration of the policies. So, ma'am, we talked about tech right now, but do you think that government initiatives should also promote art and confidence building measures or activities from a primary level? Because when we look at students, this is something that is very important these days to compete, because soft skills is what are a lot of people looking for. So
I would say I partially agree to the question. I would say let's not limit to only say art and confidence. There are a lot of things that a child needs to learn at the primary level apart from being confident. I might be confident, but uh, I might not be good at studies, or I might be good at studies, but um, confidence is something that I might be lacking at, right? So there has to be a balance. So it's a very broad and open-ended discussion that I think governments also end up engaging in, and it boils down to saying that we need to focus on the holistic development of a child. But I think when we say holistic development, there are a lot of things that specifically governments are trying to focus on.
I mean, definitely, ma'am, I agree, because if we look at even if we look at, the medals that we receive in the Olympics or at the Commonwealth, it is because, like, when we look at the medal tally, we see that other countries are like have a huge load of medals because they have like great sports infrastructure. Whereas in our country, when there is, the basic things are not available here, and when a particular level has been attained, only then those funds and stuffs are being taught. But why not at a beginner's level, like at the
Primary level.
primary level? So that is where it is lacking. So I think you agree that we need initiatives to actually promote sports, or for that matter vocational skills.
Yeah, definitely. I think not just sports and vocational. Again, it's a broad umbrella of holistic development, which says that your agenda should not be, at least at the primary level, when a kid is just starting to learn basics. It's about just getting them interested in this concept of education. If a child is not interested at that point of time to study, you will never be able to get that child back in school, and hence this causes a lot of dropouts. Also, this idea of, I'll just leave you with a thought on this. This is something that I also don't have an answer to this, but I think you should also think about this, that is the larger agenda of eventually getting a child into school and ensuring that the child is getting education, is it like holistic development, or is it ensuring that they should be able to get a job after they finish their education? This is a long debate and a very interesting conversation that usually happens in a lot of government offices, that eventually I think there is this balance that you need to bring between ensuring that a child is undergoing an holistic development, and also making sure that they become employable when they graduate, when they're done with their basic primary, upper primary, secondary schooling, right? But how do you bring that balance of ensuring that there is holistic development and you're also giving them those skills which make them employable? I think that's something that we also, when I was in school, we were not taught any skills that made us employable. We have learned all of those skills on our own, right? So government needs to start focus on building this balance of giving those skills. For example, confidence is a skill that everyone needs to learn. Imagine a simple thing like being able to speak English fluently, and or being able to converse with someone and put out your thoughts in an efficient way, something that we're trying to do through this small session that we're all sitting in today, right? This is the privilege that we have, that we're all able to put out what we're thinking efficiently and effectively to the other person. These are small skills that government is trying to build, but I think there's a lot more that they need to do in terms of ensuring that they go beyond art and confidence and a lot of other things that needs to be imparted at the primary level.
Definitely, ma'am, because in the past few years, recently only, I think the government had, a motive of probably making the kids, employable, or, having study, able to get a job after their schooling. By, they tried inculcating artificial intelligence as a paper in the course curriculum from 10th to 12th. So I think this was, in my perspective, this might be a possible motive towards, enhancing the basic skills of the kids, so that they're able to have a higher degree of, understanding to this subject.
Yeah, that's true. Also this debate around when you should start learning coding. This has been a long debate that a sixth class child is forced to learn coding now. But is it the right thing to do or not? Does a child who's only in a sixth class, does he or she already need to learn coding? So that, do you want that child to start thinking about being employable at this age? Is that even necessary? I agree that, and it's me who's saying that, government should impart skills that make them employable. But what kind of skills are these then? Is coding an important skill that you need to start imparting in sixth class? Is that like, I know it's important, but how important is it that you do it in a class, in a sixth class? So I personally feel that soft skills are something that the government should focus, at least at the primary level, and these hard skills are something that a child would eventually develop based on their own interest. You cannot force or build a market or a fear of not being able to know something, and then parents pushing their children to learn coding forcefully because everyone around you is also learning coding. This is not how a child is going to learn and develop their own personal interest. They might forcefully learn it now, but what if they don't want to do it eventually? I think that's something that not just the governments. I think education is not just governments. It goes way beyond that.
Yeah,
I think the entire ecosystem needs to understand that it has to be customized based on our own interest. For example, it's 21 of us here, including me on the call. And we are here today because policy is something that interests us, right? We enjoy talking about it. We enjoy reading about it. But not the entire universe enjoys talking about policy and education in India. So it has to be customized at some point of time. You need to understand that every child has their own interests and their own inclinations.
Talking about soft skills, because they are such an important aspect that needs to be inculcated among students. Ma'am, what could the government do to increase the enrollment of specially disabled children? Because I mean, like people are talking that they should have special schools, when in reality, even though I agree that they should be customized courses for them, but eventually they'll end up in the same competition with the regular kids. I won't even call them regular kids, with the group as a whole. So don't you think that they should also be a part of the mainstream schooling, so that they get a bit as to how to tackle with this competition in life?
Yeah, I think this is also kind of a complex scenario wherein I've also personally witnessed it, and I also felt at that point of time that you need to include them in the mainstream education if eventually they're going to compete in the same market, right? I don't know if, and I think all of you would agree on the fact that when you go out for jobs, there is no segregation, right? It's everyone, it's an organization and everyone is working for that organization as an employee. There is no segregation in terms of specially abled or other employees who are working in that organization. Then if there's no segregation at that point of time, why and how do you segregate at the school level or at a level of education, which is important. But I think the challenge there is, if you try to teach everyone together and you try to bring all of these specially abled children in the same classroom where the other children are also there, you will not be able to give them the right attention and focus that they might need. I think that is the reason why a lot of special schools and a lot of separate courses are developed for these children, which is needed, which I personally feel is important. But I think at some point of time, we should start thinking of getting them back to the mainstream education. If not at the primary level, maybe at the secondary or the higher secondary level. There has to be a point wherein both these things converge and they come together and sit in the same classroom, not just to learn together, but to understand that, these are two different social sections of a society, and you need to be empathetic about each other. I think that's the only way of we being socially and emotionally empathetic about the other person. So definitely there needs to be mainstreaming of both these sections of both the different kind of students in the same class, but I think not immediately at the primary level. There might be a very different need that a child who's visually impaired or someone who needs a special attention, I don't think that will be solved in a class where the needs might be very different. And in terms of making our school education atmosphere accessible to these children, I think as we spoke about infrastructure is the first thing that needs to be done, which is very badly lacking in India. We still don't have ramps, despite having a policy that all schools should have ramps, they should have railings, they should be physically at least accessible. They are not. And which is a very, it's sad to know that despite government trying to do a lot of things in this area, schools are still not physically accessible to a lot of children. I don't know by when they plan to do it, but I think this is the first thing that they need to do. If a school is not accessible, no child who's specially able will be able to have that confidence to go and attend a class in a school. They will only be comfortable attending schools if they are physically able to access those schools, right? And I think also, just to add another quick point, I think in terms of assessment, I think there's no difference the way we assess the regular school going children and the way we assess these specially able children right now. There definitely has to be a different mechanism in terms of the way assessments are carried out for these children. The way specially able children might be learning will be very different from the way you and I will be learning. So I think the assessment specifically needs to be different for both the sections. You cannot have like a continuous and a comprehensive evaluation, something that was introduced by Kapil Sibal a few years back. And it did not work out well because our teachers were not trained to carry it out. And it failed. Even though that is the requirement of Indian education system today, it must have a CC thing. But I think not the way it was implemented in like 5-6 years back. They have to do it in a more better way and have to propose to different things for the normal school going children and for ones who need like special attention.
Yeah. Ma'am, one thing that came to my mind, I'm really sorry, I just wanted to follow up. One thing that came to my mind. Chalo, I'll just ask him, then you go ahead. So one thing that came to my mind was shadow teaching or shadow learning. So do you think that if we incorporate that in the mainstream, it will help them to adjust the specially able children?
I'm really not sure. So what is your understanding of shadow teaching and shadow learning?
I mean, somebody, helping them, staying with them. So that is what I understand from the concept of shadow learning. So, yeah.
To some extent, it might be able to help, but the scale at which governments operate, I don't think that's going to be practically feasible in terms of the resources they might need to hire, in terms of the money that they might need to do this. Instead, I think the current the way it's currently happening, that you build a special classroom for these children, maybe within the same school premises or maybe like a different school premises, and you hire special educators who teach these group of children together, because education is not just about learning, it is also about having those peers around you. It's also about those experience of sitting in a classroom with other 30 students, right? It cannot happen at an individual level. So that experience also is equally important. And for that to happen, you will have to have like a classroom setting wherein everything is happening in person, face to face, in presence of a special educator. I think that is important. Specifically for specially able, what additionally can be done is to have like a support teacher. There is a teacher who is a special educator who's teaching the class, but because these children are specially abled and they need extra attention, have like a support teacher, something that is also done in Anganwadis. There is a main Anganwadi worker and there is a Sahika Anganwadi worker who's there to support her. I think this is something that they should also try doing in education now. You have a main teacher who's there teaching in the class, but for specially able classrooms, have a support teacher who's able to foresee the other requirements of these children and make them comfortable in the class so that they're able to focus on learning. I think this is something that should be experimented in classrooms now.
Thank you for the answer, ma'am. Go ahead, Noor.
Yeah, thank you, Viniti. Sorry for interrupting you. Hi, ma'am. I'm Harmandeep Kaur from Project Guria team. And I completely agree with your point on, providing special educational provisions for intellectually disabled kids and physically disabled kids. But as a psychology student, I feel that there's two sides of the coin. Now, there's also intellectually gifted children who have IQs above 130 and 150. But in India, I haven't seen many institutions that specially cater to them. So because they are intellectually gifted, sometimes they don't fit in regular classrooms. They need more intellectual stimulation in order to be interested. So I have seen intellectually gifted children drop out of schools because they don't get the required stimulation that they need. So what do you propose for this?
I think you will be the best person to answer this question, frankly speaking, Noor. I have witnessed this personally. I agree to the fact that yes, these children eventually end up dropping out from the school because they do not get the, I mean, no one is basically able to understand the talent that these children carry, right? Only when you understand their intellectual intelligence, you'll be able to push them further. And this is definitely lacking currently. I don't think I'm in the position to answer this, that how can governments improve this and ensure that these children get the required attention they need and stop them from dropping out. Maybe one thing that could be done is, so this is again, this might happen at a very individual level. This cannot happen from a policy level. There are a lot of things that might be happening and we might not be aware about it. For example, when I was in Singrauli in Madhya Pradesh, we also had a lot of such children who were way beyond than their classroom, the classroom atmosphere, and they needed special attention, and they could have done really well if they would have got the right amount of support and attention at that point of time. I think it has to begin at the level of a district or a school, wherein, a school or a district flags that, we have these special children who might be able to do very well. And they should be able to participate in these national and international level Olympiads, which some of them do get to. I think that is an opportunity that if given to these children, they might be able to represent our country at a very high level. And I mean, and I have seen some children being able to do that and representing and winning laurels at such a high level. But I don't know if a policy around this can be built and something can be done around to help a lot of these children, because there might not be too many of such children, even though one or two might make a lot of difference, and it should actually. But a policy catering to these children seems like a far-fetched idea to me right now. I don't think governments still focus on catering to a limited children who might be able to help. Their idea is still to cater to a larger population. I think their agenda remains focused to that. But this is an interesting thing. I think you should. I mean, I'll be glad to know if you sometime are able to work around on this and you have an idea around this. Please do share. I'll be interested to know if you have any thoughts further on this. It would be interesting to know from you.
Ma'am, I believe that the concept of IQ testing is very important in order to identify children who are intellectually gifted and at the same time intellectually disabled. So we've been taught in our class that the percentage of the gifted and intellectually disabled children on both sides of the IQ spectrum, it's approximately 20%. So even if you account for 20% of children in India, it's a lot. So I believe on a very primary level, we should be looking towards administrating IQ tests in order to identify such children. And then, I'm I agree with the fact that we don't have enough resources for teaching regular children, that, we allocate something towards the needs of intellectually gifted and disabled. But still, I believe some funds of the government should go towards building, uh, either some camps in order to improve their interest in education and developing their talent, or either setting up educational facilities for them. So I think IQ testing and identification is an important step that we can take.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Definitely identification or recognition is the first thing. The reason why this hasn't been spoken around much and hasn't taken the shape of a policy is because there's no recognition of such children, right? The recognition has to happen from a top to up, a bottom up approach. And only if you're able to recognize and identify that, there are these children in the pockets of a lot of states in India, you'll be able to convert that into a policy and maybe formulate a process around it. So definitely identification is the first thing. On the point of IQ, I'm not sure if that's the best thing to do. It might help to some extent, but I also foresee a problem in that, in the sense that it might also lead to a lot of discrimination, because uh, doing it at a large scale and doing it for everyone for the sake of identifying these specially able children who have high intellectual means might help them, but in a way backfire for the ones who are not, right? Uh, so this might, in a way, lead to some amount of discrimination, at least at the primary level, because it's a very sensitive stage, and uh, you cannot take the risk of using IQ as a tool to identify how intelligent someone is and how intelligent someone is not. So this IQ testing is a good thing, but it also has a lot of risk involved with it. So yeah.
So the extent to which I know about this discrimination that gets associated with tagging someone as gifted and someone as regular. So it does happen a lot in our field. So what I recommend in order to reduce this is that I feel like every school should have a counselor, not only in order to identify children who are differently able, but also in order to reduce, the discrimination, peer pressure, or bullying that normal children face on an everyday basis, because that also affects their adjustment in a classroom environment. So, again, that also has an impact on what kind of education and what kind of social skills they're taking home. If they have a negative mood throughout the day in a classroom, they won't be engaging in much learning, I feel. So hiring counselors is a very important step, I think, that the government should take, that the schools should take, and the government should implement.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I think I agree to that. And if not at the school level, maybe at least at a broader level, maybe at the cluster level, there has to be something, and there has to be at least this conversation around the mental well-being of children, which is not currently happening in government schools. There are some conversations happening in private schools in India around these things, and a lot of private schools might have a lot of these counselors per se, or career guiders also. But I think government schools are way beyond these conversations. They haven't really reached at that level that they can start having these conversations around having counselors in schools. But yeah, that's an interesting thing that you bring. I think governments, it might be very difficult for them to start at the level of a school, even if they start proposing this at the level of a cluster or a block, or maybe at least trying to understand the needs of the children in terms of counseling, in terms of peer pressure, in terms of what are the needs in general, right? It's not just about a kid going to school and learning and coming back from school. It's also about what the child aspires to be broadly. Uh, Going back to the conversation from where we started, right? It was amazing to know that you guys at this level have so much knowledge around policy, around education, around a lot of policy issues that our country is going through. When I was at your age, I had no clue. We had no understanding of what policy is and what policy and education space is, right? It was only after working for so many years, I mean, juggling a lot of other things, I realized that this is something that's interesting and I would want to work in. So I think aspirations is also something that the government should start thinking about, because eventually you need to make sure that a child is able to reach maximum potential of his or her aspiration, right? There's no point of going to a school and then not being able to do anything after school. You have to uh, turn that learning from school into something. You build something, you work at an organization, you help some other people to build something. There has to be a takeaway from the school, and that aspiration concept is something that's very largely missing in India. We don't know what are the options that we can pursue after we complete school. Engineering is like a 99% thing that everyone wants to do and everyone ends up doing in India. But what after, what apart from engineering, apart from doctor, apart from, for example, public policy is not that, I don't see is like a spoken career option in India. It wasn't. It's slowly coming to be. But yeah, so aspiration is also an interesting thing apart from having counselors in government schools.
Thanks for the enlightening response again, ma'am. I think it also calls back to what you mentioned before about, I think it was slightly not the same topic, but you mentioned students being pressured into coding before they get to know more about this there. So counselors would help students at least know about their options and then explore them.
Right.
Before we wrap up the quick Q&A session, however, I just wanted to ask one more thing. When you brought up private and public schools, right? I was wondering, how can the government or anyone address the large problem that states like Sikkim face, where the distance of government schools or any schools from the students is so large, and the students need to spend a lot of time just going there on foot, even sometimes. How can these challenges be covered up?
I think so. Definitely, tech is one. I mean, getting teachers to your doorstep instead of children being. I mean, this is not something that could be done everywhere. This should only be done where it's completely impossible for a child to go and attend school physically. Because as I was saying, education also requires like a social context to it. It is not just about you sitting with your laptop or sitting with your device in front and learning. It needs like a peer interaction, and that's the whole idea of education. That's how we all have learned, right, in our school. But in areas where it's impossible to do that, and uh, technology is one way. The other is, I think I was reading about it a few days back, government is moving beyond the concept of schools now. They're trying to use any public facility which is available around a group of households and convert that into a temporary school, which is very interesting. For example, if you have like a community, what do they call this? You have a community hall around your area. They convert that into a temporary school. The teacher travels down to that community area to teach whatever number of children can attend school in that community area, even if it's 20, even if it's 15, be the number that's possible. So they're trying to experiment with this concept now and see if they can convert these public places into temporary schools for education, and try to deliver education through these. So basically, the children do not need to travel, and also because it's risky for them, especially at the primary level, parents do not want to send their children out alone because they need to travel a lot. Also in extreme weather conditions, because you specifically mentioned Sikkim. Sikkim has extreme weather conditions, and schools need to be shut down during those extreme weather, be it rain or be it like floods. I think so. That's a concept that's interesting, and I think we should explore that further. How can you bring school to children instead of children being able to, and children not being able to go to school every day? So yeah.
Thanks a lot for the response, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such insightful opinions and answers to all the inquisitive team members. Now, I would like to thank you, ma'am, once again. And I would like to ask each and every member that we'll be starting with the weekly policy discussion about the same topic. So, ma'am, you're most welcome to stay here and listen to the views
Sure.
and give in your insights as and when you feel like.
Sure.
So, Krish.
Thanks, Abhiniti. I'm sure that after listening to Kohima ma'am's very engaging talk, we have all benefited to a great extent. And we've also learned more about the topic at hand. Just to quickly restate our topic at hand, it is government initiatives to uplift the enrollment and quality of education across government schools in India. After Kohima ma'am's expert comments, I hope that we can all have a very fruitful discussion today. And I think we have what was it? Project Vedna, which will be taking charge of the discussion today. So I would request the team leader of Project Vedna to start us off. If the team leader of Project Vedna is not in the meeting with us today, I would request anybody else from the team to please come up and start our discussion. If no one from Project Vedna is present, anyone who thinks they have any insightful views after ma'am's talk.
Yeah, can I start?
Yeah. Thanks, Nur.
Yeah, sure. So I don't think I'm going to be talking about specific policies because I feel like after a point, the government just, started reposting the same things over and over again because the past counterparts of them were not working. So, and I feel like over the years, the quality of the policies have degraded a lot. And, after a point of time, they went through a stagnation phase where there was no increase in enrollment or any other significant changes taking place, but the government still tried to do their best. So I would like to discuss the limitations with most of the policies that are implemented, and also then what can be done in order to bring about an actual change. So in terms of limitations, I feel like the implementation of policies is very lacking. So I think one of the major contributors to a decrease in enrollment rates in schools is child labor. And child labor, if you see, is still very prevalent in India. And I feel like nothing has been done for the past few years in order to reduce the number of children that have been forcefully engaged in labor, despite being, below 18 years of age. I feel like even making 18 a threshold for, not being able to pursue education is wrong. And this age should be increased to at least 25. So children can pursue higher level education too, and they can choose what field they want to go into. So implementation of educational policies is lacking, and the implementation of child labor laws is also lacking. So secondly, I feel all the initiatives are very surface level initiatives. So they don't work on the ground level. For example, even if you implement changes in the legislature, all it boils down to is whether that legislation will be followed by people or not. So making a law like, increasing the marriageable age to 18 or 21 doesn't have an effect on people who still, um, send their daughters to another household when they're 14 to 15 who engage in child marriage. So I read about this initiative in Gujarat state that took place where in order to increase children's enrollment, they provided the children cycles in order to, have an access to schooling, because schools are located in remote areas in many states. So this had a huge impact on the children, because they were able to actually travel to school without, you know, having to think about what to do and how to approach the school. So I believe some initiatives, most of the initiatives are very surface level that are taken by the government. They only remain on the legislation level and they never reach the population. So I think a little more thinking should go into what kind of initiatives the government should be taking. Next is a lack of awareness, of course. Normal people still don't, are not aware of all the legislations against not sending your children to school. They don't believe in the right to education. They don't believe in the right of freedom and free will and etc. of children. And this lack of awareness has created a dilemma for children across the country. So I believe awareness should be increased, especially now that social media is so prevalent. We should be taking some social initiatives by spreading awareness through social media, and campaigns, etc., to reach the mass level. Next, I feel like there is a lack of funds which are allocated to higher level education institutions. So even if the government is providing some incentives for primary schooling, I feel the college level, or at the college level or university level, if you look at the fees of institutions, it's so high that parents, even if they want to send their child for higher level education, they are not able to afford it. So the adolescent or the child is forced to drop out. So I believe more funds should be allocated to make it easier for people to approach this higher level educational institutions, and complete their schooling in a manner that gives them skills to be able to apply them in the practical world and get real jobs, which is the end goal of many people who get into education. And lastly, I feel there is a reluctance of public schools in following the equalitarian policies in favor of their own profit maximization. And like, even if the government implements policies that some fees should be reduced for children that come from disadvantaged sections of the society, public schools are very reluctant in following such measures, because of course for them education is a way of earning money. It's a business for them, and uh, they don't easily open up to such egalitarian policies. And in terms of what can be done in order to reduce the lack of implementation or the ineffectiveness of policies, I feel, is to design ground level policies that have a real impact on enrollment rate. So providing resources to build schools in remote areas, providing transportation to children so that they can travel to school in these remote areas is very important. Secondly, as a part of Team Guria, of course, I would like to profess the need to encourage girls to pursue education and improve the gender equality in schools, because even if you look at regular classrooms, you'll see a greater number of boys sitting in every classroom as compared to girls. And similarly, sometimes the educators also practice gender biased teaching methods in classrooms. So I feel that should also be tackled. Next, I feel that there is a need to introduce life skills in curriculum, like ma'am was talking about. So children can learn such skills which can be applied to practical settings. So if you look at these SUPW periods that were introduced in schools, we had home economics, but most of the children who enrolled into home economics were girls. So I feel like the boys should also have this ability to take care of their basic needs like cooking, how to be able to sew a button, how to be able to live without the support of a female in the household. So I feel life enrichment skills and basic skills should be equally distributed amongst girls and boys at a school level. So lastly, as a psychology student also, I feel this is a bit far-fetched, but I desperately feel a need to improve the mental health situation of students in schools. So of course, there is a problem when it comes to adjustment of the children. Some children do not readily adjust to the school environment, and that you know that they face obvious obstacles in their way of being able to communicate their thoughts and feelings in the classroom settings. So, as I mentioned before, I feel counselors should be hired by schools who take care of these sensitive issues like discrimination, peer pressure, and bullying in classrooms. I feel these are the policies that should be implemented by the government. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your views, Vinod. You give us a lot of very points, and I agree with a lot. I agree with pretty much every of them, all of them. Sorry. Especially, I think the thing you mentioned about surface level policies. It also links back to what Ma'am said earlier about how, at least now, the government is trying to, numerically measure the effect of policies, and that's also something that I feel will help in other places. Like you mentioned, the SUWP classes. I have those in my school every other week, but they're often taken over by teachers to finish syllabuses and all that, right? So since the effect of such policies isn't measured, they often get overlooked massively. Once again, thanks for all your points. And next up, we have Abhinav. Abhinav, could you start off with your thoughts?
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Uh, I would be focusing on a specific initiative taken by the Ministry of Education last year, which is the Nipun Bharat scheme, which is National Initiative for Proficiency in Reading with Understanding and Numeracy. And if you look at the scheme, it basically covers children in the age group of 3 to 9 years. So one can say that this scheme is, foundational in nature, since the main objective of this policy is to ensure that the students acquire foundational literacy and numeracy, so that the child is confident about the abilities that they have, and this ensures that they do not drop out when in higher levels, where the syllabus becomes difficult when one needs to put these skills and abilities to use. So the main focus areas of the initiative is to ensure that, as I've mentioned before, the skills, the foundational skills of the child. And when one sees it from the teacher's perspective, it is to also equip the teacher with proper resources and tools so that they can ensure that the child is, getting a very tight grip over these foundational skills. So, uh, at the same time, it also becomes important the kind of resources and learning materials that are being used by the teacher. So the initiative has like a lot of innovative aspects to it. For instance, the policy of this, like the policy booklet of this scheme mentions that how the teachers could use certain toy-based and experiential learning activities, so that the lessons that are taught to these students, they are more interesting and more engaging, and the child feels encouraged to attend school every day. And also at the same time, holistic development, like the initiative tries to focus on holistic development of the child, where the student is just not focusing on the syllabus and the lessons and chapters per se, but they are also learning certain social skills, certain emotional skills, so as to how to interact with others. And yeah, this is the particular scheme that I found that is really interesting, since it has only been a year after, like after it has come into being. It is very difficult to analyze at this point how its impact has been, but I found this initiative very different as compared to the other initiatives that are there brought about by the central government as well as the state government. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot for telling us about this policy, Abhinav. And I think you're right, especially about your last point. It takes a lot of time for us to really measure the positive effects of educational policy. So I hope as time goes on, we'll eventually see people with stronger soft skills, so to speak, in our workforce and just in our society as a whole. Next up is Ashtha. Ashtha, could you take over the stage?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Hope I'm audible and visible to all of you. So a brief introduction about me. I am Astha. I am a policy research intern at Project Suction, and I reside in Delhi. And I also happen to be a student of Delhi Government School. I used to be, now I am in college. So I think that I can provide a personalized view on this specific topic, as I have looked closely what all these things are and how they are. And trust me, the things which you see on internet are a lot different than what is happening in reality. Like, there are two different things: planning something and implementing something. So there are a lot of good plans that we can introduce this, we can introduce that, this will be good for students. But when it comes to implementation, we are like way behind and we need to cover up a lot in implementation. When it comes to implementation, it's already know the reports you see that the planning and implementation are not equal. But if you see the reality, then you see that the report is also not reality. The reality is much more different than what the report caters, what the report tells you, that it reached to 20,000 students maybe, but in reality, only 1,000 of them are benefited from it. So I think the thing I should be focusing on, and or we all should be focusing on, the planning and implementation. Like, anyone can come up with good plans that we need to do this, we need to do that. But when it comes to implementation, we need to work a lot on that. We need to, look what the students actually need. And if we are implementing good plan, if we are planning good plans, then they also need to be implemented. So starting with this, I have a lot of things in my mind. So I think I should start with some policies. So education is a fundamental for achieving full human potential, developing an equitable and just society, and promoting national development. Providing universal access to quality education is the key to India's continued ascent and leadership on the global stage in terms of economic growth, social justice and equality, scientific advancement, national integration, and cultural preservance. Universal high quality education is the best way forward for developing and maximizing our country's rich talents and resources for the good of the individual, the society, the country, and the world. There are so many new initiatives taken to uplift the quality of education in government school. One of the recent one being National Education Policy. National Education Policy 2022 lays a particular emphasis on the development of the creative potential of each individual. It is based on the principle that education must develop not only cognitive capacities, but the foundation capacities of literacy and numeracy and higher order cognitive capabilities, such as critical thinking and problem solving, but also social, ethical, and emotional capacities and dispositions. Objective of NEP is to develop good human being capable of rational thought and action, possessing compassion and empathy, courage and resilience, scientific temper and creative imagination. With sound ethical morals and values, it aims at producing engaged, productive, and contribution citizens for bringing an equitable, inclusive, and plural society by our constitution. While this policy is still in its implementation stage, I'm sure that this initiative will be the most successful. Other initiatives taken by the government for government school include e-learning materials for teachers and students. As mentioned by a lot of you, there was a platform named Diksha that was developed, a dedicated digital infrastructure for knowledge sharing for both teachers and for the students. And this is expected to be substantially augmented the knowledge based on students and technical skills of teachers at no additional cost. The next thing that I wanted to discuss is interactive content for students. So a single point repository of e-resources called ePathshala containing NCERT textbooks and various other learning resources have been developed for showcasing and disseminating all educational resources, including textbooks, audio, video, periodicals, and a lot more. Another thing that was launched by the government was massive opening online resources, also known as MOOCs. So MHRD has launched a massive open online courses platform, popularly known as SWAYAM, Study Webs of Action Learning for Young Aspirational Mind, in 2017. The portal is offering various online courses for school education and higher education. NCERT is developing course models for MOCs for school education in 12 subject areas for class 9 to 12. The next thing that recently came during the COVID were education channels, a program of utilization of satellite communication technology for transmission of education e-content through 32 national channels. Swayam Prabha DTH-TV has been launched. While there have been a lot of new initiatives with brilliant planning, we still need to work towards a better and effective education to improve the status of government education. Also, another thing that ma'am also discussed, and I will also like to highlight that we need to work a lot on developing soft skill as well as hard skill. Like when you pass out school and when you enter college or when you enter real world, you see that there is a lot of need of soft skills, learning English or maybe learning basic communication skills, how to put up your thoughts or how to listen to others, how to do policy debate, and all these things. They are not generally taught in government schools because they think textbook knowledge is the only knowledge required. Because I think the basic aim of a government school teacher, the government school teachers basically think that their aim is to make the students literate, so that they can come under that they are literate and literacies can increase. But I think the real aim of education or any government school should be to promote holistic development, as discussed. Like along with getting a employment, there should also be us, like if we have to reach through employment, then there should also be a path. The other thing that government schools should launch is counseling. Like a lot of us after 12, there is a lot of uncertainty what to do, what not to do. And somehow government school students fail at getting a good guidance on what options they have to pursue, what options are available after they're passing out their class 12. So I think there's a lot to focus, and there are a lot of things to improve, but they can only be done with good planning and also most importantly good implementation. So that's all from my side. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for your views. I think yes, it is. Thanks for mentioning the different methods that the government had taken to combat the education gap in the pandemic as well, especially the satellite communication straight to televisions for one. Next up, we have Nirja. Nirja, could you take the stage?
Hello, everyone. So, keeping in mind what we discussed in the discussion, that enrollment isn't the end goal of education or imparting education or education policies in India. We also need to focus on long-term employment. And given that technology is taking over human society, per se. So in those lines, my adherence or in the topic would be the aspect and quality education, which I believe is crucial to work on. And that is vocational trainings, which are yet to be integrated effectively in our school curriculum. Now, vocational or skills-based education is becoming more and more important today because many employers expect new employees to have all the practical skills before they start work. And sometimes we have those students who are coming from the kind of background where they need to start being employed as soon as they exit secondary education or senior secondary education. However, conventionally, vocational education is perceived to be inferior to mainstream education, right? And it's meant largely for students who are unable to cope with the ladder that is mainstream education, the academics, and everything related to that. So this is a perception that affects the choices students make, and there's a need to completely reimagine how vocational education is offered to the students in future, a future of technology, like I said. So also the 12th five-year plan estimated that only a very small percentage of Indian students or Indian workforce in the age group of 19 to 24 received formal vocational education, whereas in countries like USA, it was 52%, in Germany it was great, and if we look at South Korea, it is as high as 96%. So these numbers only underline the urgency of the need to hasten the spread of vocational education in India. Now comes in the scenario, National Education Policy 2020. This policy aims to reimagine vocational education. Now, as it unfolds, we are expected to overcome the social status hierarchy associated with vocational education. Like we have had it in our history to have Varna system, which assigns work to people according to their castes, the castes that they were born in. So I hope it helps fight that. Also, it does the required integration of vocational education programs into mainstream education in all the education institutions, but in a phased manner. So beginning with vocational exposure at early ages in middle and secondary schools, quality education will be integrated smoothly into higher education, and it will ensure that every child learns at least one vocation and is exposed to several others. This could lead to emphasizing the dignity of labor and importance of various vocations involving Indian arts and artisanship. So over the next decade, focus areas of vocational education have been capped based on skill gap analysis and mapping of local opportunities, and MHRD will constitute a national committee for the integration of vocational education. This consists of experts in vocational education and representatives from across ministries in collaboration with industry to oversee the effort. And also individual institutions that were early adopters must innovate to find models and practices that work and then share these with other institutions through mechanisms set up by NCIVE. Now, Indian standards will be aligned with the international standard classification of occupations maintained by the International Labour Organization. The study of the previous vocational education system identified the following problem areas, which is high dropout at secondary level and lacking participation of private industries, or less number of vocational institutes in the country, or inadequate number of trained faculty, lacking of new sectors of vocational education and skills training, lack of opportunities, and current education system is non-responsive to the skill demands of the existing and future industry, leading to a supply-demand gap on various counts. So I believe keeping in mind to address these challenges and working effectively with NEP can have us look forward to a future with our skills lying at the core. Thank you.
Thanks for your words, Nirja, and also especially thanks for bringing up the NEP. We surprisingly hadn't discussed it very deeply earlier today. So just before we completely wrap up for the day, ma'am, Kohima, do you have any words you would like to give us?
No, I think thank you. This was an equal learning opportunity for me. I really enjoyed listening to everyone towards the end. And I think the kind of questions that you have and the kind of discussions that you have through this platform is it's engaging and it's enriching, even for me. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us here and sharing your precious time with us and your insights as well. I think it was like a great learning opportunity for all of us. As you all know that we have these weekly, we have these discussions weekly. So I request you all to please turn on your cameras and we'll have a quick photo for this session. And while everybody is turning on their cameras, till then I'll make an announcement. I'll announce next week's discussion topic. So the topic for next week's discussion is health and hygiene and Indian schools, the current status and the way forward. We'll send this to you, and Hopefully you'll prepare just like you did today, as it was a very fruitful discussion. So now let me take a picture and then we'll just start. Just a minute. Okay, I'll take the picture. Smile, everyone. Thank you so much. The picture is taken. Thank you so much for joining the event and sharing your valuable time and patiently listening to each and everybody's viewpoints. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Just in case you guys want to reach out